great to have you here. So back today with another horror movie review video. This one being Ouija, Origins of Evil. So I'd never seen the Ouija series at all. I had never seen the original movie, and I've heard the original movie is quite bad. So that's kind of made me steer clear of it to this point in time. I heard this one was good, however, so I watched this one a while ago. Thought it was a decent movie, so I gave it a rewatch for the sake of this review. And gonna run through the plot a little bit, give some pros, cons, give my overall thoughts at summary at the end, and just go from there. The movie really starts and kicks off with the family doing this bit of a fake medium where they're talking to the dead family of this couple that's in there. So it's like the girl and her father. And I don't know, I think they're presumably talking to his wife, and they're running a bit of a charade, telling him what he wants to hear as far as, oh yes, here's what your wife is saying. And the girl catches on a little bit and she's like, this is fake, this is BS. But they continue through with it and he believes it, and they ultimately leave. And then we do find out afterwards that yes, the woman running the medium like business as far as speaking to the spirits, her two daughters are there in the room with her, and they're part of the charade as far as making the gimmick work and making things happen behind the scenes that the girl and her father weren't seeing at the time. So that kind of kicks off the movie. We get a little bit of backstory with the husband having passed away. So it's just this mom and her two daughters that are really the main characters, plus the priest, I would say, in this movie. And as mentioned, I haven't seen the original Ouija, so I imagine there's a lot of tie-ins here, but this is a prequel. So it kind of works out watching this one by itself because you don't necessarily need the backstory since this isn't a direct follow-up to that original movie. But either way, fast forward some time, we have the older sister sneak out and she goes to a party in which they play with a Ouija board and kind of gives them the idea of, hey, maybe we add this Ouija board to our routine as far as how we can convince these people that this is a real situation, and this kind of gives us more credibility as far as doing some new mechanics that'll add to the show, if you will. The little girl, really especially, she is messing with the Ouija board a lot, and she's under the perception that her father is able to talk to them through the Ouija board. And the family's struggling a bit financially, so you have the little girl who gets money from the walls in the basement, and then the mom's like, where'd you get this money? And she's like, it's from the walls, Daddy gave it to us. So then they do one of the Ouija boards and go through it, and the mom asks a question that only her husband would know. I think she asks like where she was at when the little girl, they found out that she was pregnant with her, and the answer was the shower. So once that answer is given, the mom is fully in belief mode. She's like, nobody else would know this other than him, so it has to be true. So from there, they really get invested into doing that type of work, like fully into doing the Ouija board. The girl even stops going to school for a little bit, the younger girl at least. And there's a scene where she sneaks out at night and she's like messing with the board and she's trying to talk to her dad. She hasn't seen him yet, so she really wants to see him. And she gets fully possessed by the demon who's pretending to be the father. So he's giving answers as if he's the father. Then we fully see the demon and he enters into the little girl. So he has now taken her over at this point. I think her name is Doris. She is taken over at this point, and she's acting a little bit creepy. It's your typical like creepy little girl situation. She's at school. At one point, there's even like a kid who's like trying to bully her with a slingshot, and she mentally like reverses it. So he shoots himself in the face with the slingshot. So a lot of kind of small breadcrumbs of this girl's evil powers that are really taking place here. And then the one morning they're going to go to school. The little girl really doesn't want to go. She's like gung-ho, like, I'm not going to school. And then the mom tells the other sister, saying, hey, can you grab her stuff? She's going to school. And here's probably, I'll get into the little pros, cons later, but here's a bit of a con, I would say, is that it felt, you're doing this for plot development, asking that question, hey, go get your sister stuff. That gives the older sister the opportunity to see what the younger sister is doing on some of her paperwork that she sees under her bed. She grabs that, they go to school, she gives it to the priest, and she says, this is some other language, I think it's like Polish. So he translates it, and then we fast forward a little bit of time, and you have the priest and the mom, kind of, they seem like they're good friends, like they go to dinner at one point, and the priest says, hey, I'll do the Ouija board, you can have it done on me. I'd be curious to see, he had a wife previously who passed away, and now he's a priest, so he agrees to do the Ouija board, saying, hey, I'll talk to her and see what she says about a few questions I may have. They do that, and then the priest asks like what her middle name was, and then he asks what they fought over, and the middle name is answered, but the fight is not really answered. And then they kind of move on, and the priest is like, hey, I need to talk to you about your kid. So he goes upstairs with the mom and the older girl, Lena, and the younger girl stays downstairs watching TV. When they're upstairs, this is probably one of the cooler parts of the movie. You have the priest kind of give the background saying, hey, a lot of these writings were really messed up, and I got them translated, and there's a lot more backstory here. He gives some details as far as there's like the historicness of the house, where back in the day there was like these doctors and these tests done on these people, and a lot of people were tortured. There's a really drawn out description of what happened at this house in the past that he goes through. On top of that, really cool seeing when he was doing the Ouija board test with Doris running the planchette, he gave answers that he wound up kind of tricking Doris with. He asked what the middle name was, and he immediately thinks of his mom's middle name instead of his wife's middle name. And because he's thinking it, that's the answer that the demon gives through Doris as Lynn. And then when he asks what the fight was about, he just completely shuts his brain down, doesn't think about anything. And that's when they're not able to give an answer on what the fight was on. He gives also some extra tidbits saying like, yeah, I don't really know if that was actually her voice. It could have just been a girl's voice, like any female voice you may want to believe is your wife's voice, and they only say one word, so it's not enough to really tell through inflection or anything like that. So they wind up going downstairs, and they realize, hey, maybe the reason for the demon knowing the answer to where they were at when the mom was pregnant with the daughter is because the house is able to listen to what's going on. So the demon's in the house is possessed, and anything they've talked about inside of the house has been documented. So they're able to answer pretty much anything about their lives because that's where they spend a majority of their life at. So that's how they answered that question. They go downstairs, they see the boyfriend of the older girl. He gets like hung through. So he came over when they were upstairs, and the little girl wound up killing him, and he gets like thrown through. It's a kind of a jump scare, tension building scene where he comes down from the rafters. He's like hung. They wind up going down further into the basement to try to resolve the situation. They put the Ouija board in the furnace and they burn it. And then the priest says, hey, I'm going to go in this other room to confront the little girl and take care of the situation. So he goes in by himself. He tries to talk to the girl doing like his typical priest type of language. But he winds up coming out, and you see his eyes are white, and he's got a knife. So he got turned while he was in there with Doris as well. Chases them upstairs, and then the demon is kind of just done with him. She like throws the priest aside, and he like snaps his neck on the staircase. The older daughter and the mom go upstairs. They wind up getting captured by the younger daughter. There's some kind of playing around with the boyfriend who's hung. He winds up grabbing somebody and throwing them around. So there's a lot going on in the house. They wind up both getting captured. And then we fast forward to the mom waking up. She's like chained down. Older daughter winds up going over to the younger daughter, and she's like, I'm going to stitch your mouth shut just like the doll that I had. So she does that, and I think that may wind up killing Doris in that moment. The mom gets out, and she's like, why did you do this? And she's like, she was, she had to stop talking. She was doing bad things. And then you have the older daughter stab the mom. So the only one left alive by the end of this movie is Lena. And then fast forward a little bit in time, you have Lena in this like mental hospital, and she's being interviewed by a guy, and he's like, hey, where's your sister at? And she's like, I don't know, ask my mom. And he's like, dude, we've done this 1,000 times. Your mom's dead. You did it. So it doesn't seem like he's making any progress, but he's continuing to try to ask her questions. And then we cut to a scene where he's like walking by the hallway with the rooms. Cuts back, you see the girl, Lena, right there. And just before this, she had like shed her blood to use a Ouija board on the floor and try to summon presumably her sister. And then we see right before the credits roll, the sister on the ceiling with like her eyes white, just running towards the door. So maybe the doctor is going to get killed at that point. Maybe they'll release Lena. I don't know. So that kind of is how things end. There's also a post-credit scene with Lynn Shay. I think she may be in the original one. And maybe she's an adult Lena. As I said, I haven't watched that one, but that's my assumption as far as what kind of tie-in that post-credit scene had. Overall, was an okay movie. Giving a little bit of my thoughts here. I thought the demon was a cool look. They don't have to show it a whole lot of times. It's only really shown twice that I can recall. Once when the younger girl's actually getting possessed, and then secondly near the end of the movie where the older girl's kind of being grabbed as she's trying to stitch the mouth of the younger girl. There's like behind her, you see it too. So it's very lightly shown, and I think it's effective when it is shown, and it looks good overall. Also, the scene with the priest when he comes to the house and tells them all this information about how he BS'd the Ouija board and that that little girl is pretty much demonic, and he does believe that this is a serious situation. That's a cool scene where it's just kind of a big reveal, and it shows that he is one step ahead. Doesn't really pan out for him, but he's planning for how to approach this and really fools the demon in this sense. Good tension, good jump scares. Mike Flanagan, who's responsible for this movie, I think he does jump scares effectively. It's probably done a little bit more than I would prefer, but I understand horror movies, you're gonna get that, so it makes sense. And then it comes to cons, as I pointed out earlier, I think the mom asking the older sister, hey, go get your little sister's schoolwork. It was convenient for a reason for her to grab her papers and then turn them into the priest. So somewhat of a plot development that seemed a little inauthentic. And then second to that, I'm not a big like spiritual horror or possession horror type of fan. So I will say going into this, I have potentially my biases with that not being my favorite horror subgenre. So keeping that in mind, I don't know why they go downstairs to burn the Ouija board. I feel like that was kind of a dumb move. In a lot of these horror movies, the main characters continue down to the belly of the beast and they just do not decide to leave the situation and recalibrate and come back later. They just are blindsided. Let's just go. Let's correct the situation. Let's take it on head on right now. I feel like they could have gotten a lot more backup if they were going to go down there and take that approach. But either way, that's the approach they went with, which was fine. Finally, I think it's kind of convenient that we have the main kind of character, if you will, the mom, as a spiritual medium in this house. It felt like her profession was very conveniently tied to the background of the house. So obviously that works for the plot, but what are the odds that you have a possessed house and a medium or even a fake medium as far as a profession living in this house? It feels like a lot of circumstances that don't seem super likely, but for the sake of the movie, I get that that's just the route they went with ultimately. So that's the summary, Ouija Origin of Evil. If you've watched this movie, let me know your thoughts. If you watched the original, would love to see your thoughts there. As I said at the beginning, I've heard that one's not great, and this one's definitely a step up from that movie. If I'm giving this one a score, realizing, as I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of possession horror, so this may be somewhat of a subjective opinion, but I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. I'm going to say this is an average film. I think it does a lot of things extremely well. It's just some areas that it's not something that's super of interest to me that probably bring it down a little bit overall. If you're into possession horrors, I would say give this one definitely a watch. It's, as I said, at least average to, if you're into that subgenre, maybe above average for you. So those are my thoughts overall. As mentioned, if you want to share your thoughts on this movie or just the series as a whole, we'll love to see that down below. Appreciate you guys so much for watching and hope to talk to you again soon.